Good morning, everybody. I actually was originally going to paint this guy today, and I ended up doing a stream late last night where he got painted because he just needed to be painted, and I felt like doing art. So I set up a light and did a stream then. But have no worries, we have lots more to work on. Today I'm going to be starting at least with the weird fly creature that we drew and inked on a stream yesterday. And it is a very elegant fly that drinks tea. It's a very large fly creature. They live in a secret hidden society, which is sort of very Victorian era based. And I also have this one, which is another one I finished up that's all set to have some watercolor added, and it is the Sourpuss, who likes all things sour. And then I also have this older piece that is a mermaid I had done that appears in Dragons and Rare Creatures Volume 2, but I just did kind of a quick digital color on her for that book that mainly just featured the ink drawing. And we've put this ink drawing in previous coloring books. So I've had the ink drawing sitting here and I keep looking at it and thinking, man, I really want to color that. So I'm going to be trying to get to painting as much of this stuff as I can today. Hopefully some of it on the stream, maybe all of it on the stream. We'll see how fast it goes. And I was trying to pick, I thought that would be cool to grab the mermaid because it's going to be just a very different piece by comparison to like some of the weird ones that I have picked out other than that. But I am going to kind of try to mimic some of the colors that I did for the book, just because, and I'm trying to find that now, which is why you hear mouse clicks. Just because I want to be sure that it's not totally different. So when I get to that one, we'll worry about that. So Mr. Fly Creature is up first. Okay, so on this guy, we had kind of decided yesterday that, well, she is, and I'm going to get rid of my paper, my pad under there so it doesn't kind of create weird reflections and angles. We decided that this is a female creature, and well, it will sort of have some more black or gray fly colors to it. I want it to be more iridescent and have some blues and purples and greens and things like that. So I'm going to try to avoid using any black on it because you've already got black outlines, and I don't want this to be kind of a dreary colored creature. So I'm going to start out with a very pale sort of blue here. It's called cerulean blue. I've used this a lot. I was using it last night in my stream. And this is sort of going to be my test section of our fly. I will zoom her up a little more. And I think I discovered what the issue was yesterday with the flickering. Trying to get my lighting here to be somewhat accurate. That's pretty close. So there was some weird flickering happening sometimes with the camera, and I thought maybe it was the USB port it was plugged into, but I did some research and found a similar post from a couple of years ago that just said you change which driver Windows was pointing at away from the driver for the camera to their driver, and so far I'm not seeing any flickering. So it was weird. It was almost like static. So while this blue is wet, because I want to get kind of, oh, and there goes our yard workers again outside. So I'm just gonna close the window till they finish. Thought they were done. We have the HOA has them come in and just get rid of any debris and prune things back. And I was trying to start earlier on a stream, but they were kind of making noise. So it looks kind of weird now because it is these light blues and purples and pinks that are sort of happening by mixing pink and blue. And this pink color is called Opera. But I am going to, after it's dry, add some darker colors over that, and you'll just see parts of those peeking through. So the issue is I have to wait for stuff to dry. So I'm going to start with some other areas here. Okay, so I'm starting with kind of a light green color here because in watercolor you always go light to dark. And I intentionally used waterproof ink, and we did this on watercolor paper yesterday so that coming in today it would be all set to have color added. I kind of want her to be kind of pretty because I think there's a lot of weird ideas that flies are gross or scary or ugly, and I want to do something kind of fun and pretty with her. So we'll see how that goes. So since you do light colors first, that's why I'm kind of putting these weird blues and pinks down. And I still feel like this is not showing. Let me see if I reset this. I feel like it's not really showing the blues enough. Let me see if I can fix my lighting a little bit here. Let's see if this is, there we go. Need some more natural light and less synthetic light. There we go. Now you can kind of see the blues a little more. They're very, very light because I'm going to use them as the lightest areas and add some darker color. But I'm still probably not going to use black. I'm going to use some very dark blues and kind of some more muted colors. And muted means that they have usually some black in the color. It tones it down, or some white in the color to take it away from being as bright a color. But I'm probably not going to put black on here directly till the very end, if at all. So, because I want this to be kind of like iridescent looking for our weird little fly creature. So I'm doing all this underpainting first, and I'm using a pretty big brush because I'm going to do all the details on top of it. I think she's kind of cute. I don't think she's scary looking. She's a little weird, but I'm a little weird, so that's okay. So for anyone tuning in who doesn't know me or rewatching the video later, my name is Jessica Feinberg. I am an artist and an author in Tucson, Arizona. And I have been doing streaming for a little over 2 weeks on Twitch. I streamed before that on other platforms, but doing a lot more on Twitch now, mainly due to having friends who were streaming who kind of inspired me, and getting requests from fans who are stuck at home. So you guys can pop in and watch me do art. I'm just reopening my windows since the noise seems to have stopped. Let's hope it stopped. They were right outside earlier, so I had to wait to start streaming until they finished whatever stuff they were doing out there. Probably trimming back some of our trees and bushes and things. Overall, we have a pretty quiet community here, but occasionally there's noise. Okay, so I'm going to start with a little bit of a darker blue. I'm just trying to build up colors, and the way I'm sort of thinking is, what colors do I want to have peeking through the darker colors that I'm going to put on? And I want to take a little bit of the green that I used in the eyes and kind of dab that in here too. And I'm going to go ahead and finish kind of the face and do the details on that before I do the same process to the rest, so that it's not quite so boring as watching me just do this to everything. But if anybody is, a couple people watching, if you guys have any questions about this bizarre creature or my painting technique, I'm going to try to do the mermaid one I have after this, just to vary up the theme. And every once in a while I get like a hair. I never know if it's hair from a brush or if it's my hair or if it's a cat hair. It's probably a cat hair, no matter how careful I am, and you can just wipe it off. You don't want cat hairs drying in your paint. That's never good. Okay. I think that the floof on the back of this creature is going to have a lot more of the green in it, and the pink will be for sort of the harder parts, the shell, the mandible parts, things like that. So yeah, right now it looks like a little rainbowy creature. Hi, Dragon Soul. How are you? You guys holding up? I know everybody's getting a little stir crazy. We were very happy that our coffee shop reopened this morning. It's just for takeout, but we were able to go get some breakfast burritos and some coffee, which was nice. I can make coffee at home, but I was really missing theirs. And I miss the regulars there. We usually see the same people every time we go, and of course we just had to sort of all space out and grab our stuff to go and get out of there. So I know they have GoFundMe for our coffee shop that's raised about $4,000 to $5,000 for their employees, which is good because a lot of them were off work for a couple weeks, and our local pubs had one going for their employees. So at least they're kind of doing what they can. I'm glad to hear everything is good. I've been enjoying tuning into all sorts of other streams. I've watched some other art streams. My friend Madame Askew, who runs Tucson Steampunk Society here in Tucson, she's been streaming almost every night as she's working on different sewing projects. And in her stream last night, this strange idea for a joint project that she and I might do developed, and it kind of matches with some of the other things I'm working on right now. So, you're bored? I'm sorry. Let's see. I can recommend books. I know lots of good books. I've actually been recommending everybody read Ninth House. Well, not everybody, because it's definitely not a kid's book. The author, actually, it was the first book she wanted to write, but her publisher wanted her to do young adult books to begin with, which is not a bad thing, but she knew for Ninth House she did not want it to be that toned down. She wanted some pretty violent and scary moments in it, which are pretty key to the story. It'd be really difficult to I think it would seem watered down if you had to kind of PG those moments. So she had to wait till she kind of became successful for her other writing. And then they let her put that out, and I think it's her best book. And all most of her other books are fantasy. This is urban fantasy. It's all set around the secret societies and houses in colleges. Specifically, I believe it's Yale, where the author did actually go and was a member of those houses. But in this case, in her book, she's kind of pushed it to where the houses are magical. Nobody really knows. Like, there's only certain people who are part of it. They know. Everyone else just thinks they're sort of fraternities. But she kind of took it the direction of more like what the Harry Potter houses are, except that it's a lot darker and more adult. But because a lot of the settings in the book are places she actually went when she was in college, there's There's like a level of real mixed with the magic that's just beautiful. And the only difficult thing about Ninth House is that I wouldn't say it has a cliffhanger. Like they resolve a lot, but there's a few unresolved things that you really want to know what happens at the end. And there is another book scheduled. Is it a bee or a fly? It's a fly. We drew it yesterday. It's a fly monster. They're created by wizards in like Victorian England, and they enjoy a very sophisticated cup of tea and speak with very high pitched British accents. So they're very they're very soft. So yeah, it's not a bee. It has a few things that make it more fly based, but neither bees or flies actually have mouths like this. I wanted to add like a cute little beaky mouth on it. So I want it to be kind of more fly colors, like darker colors, but I really want it to have kind of an iridescence. So I am working on building up the colors that are going to go underneath. And then I'm going to come up with some darker colors on top, and these will peek through. But yeah, the next Ninth House book is not due out until next year, which I'm kind of slightly heartbroken about because I was very riveted. And then I realized that, yeah, there's more books, but they are not out yet. That's always hard when you're reading. Okay. I think this will work for the eye, and I'm going to let that dry. And then I'm going to try to come in and see what we can do with some of the rest of this. I feel like my camera is a little positioned weird. See if I can get the angle better. There we go. So I'm going to work on a couple different paintings today, at least this one on Mermaid, and I have a cat one I showed at the beginning of this video too I'd like to get to, but I don't know if I'll have time. And then I am going to make tasty stir fry and poke bowl stuff for us for lunch, and then I am going to spend about 5 or 6 hours just drawing in books for the Kickstarter, which you'd think I only have about 80 rewards left to get out, which is not that bad. So you would think that it wouldn't be that many books to draw in, but I've been working my way through the people from the Dragons Over Creatures Kickstarter who get 2 books. So if it's 2 books with extended art, I'm essentially drawing 4 pages of art per person. So I can maybe do like 2 to 3 books an hour tops. It's usually more like 2 books. It takes a while. And I'm doing drawings kind of like this. And now you're hearing weird people outside because they're doing our yard work. Well, not ours, the community's yard work. But I think they're just about done. So yeah, the wings I'm going to leave a lot of the white showing here because they're fly wings. They're going to be very delicate. So I'm just adding a little bit of that pink and a little bit of that blue. And right now it kind of looks sort of one color through this whole thing, but it'll look really cool when it's done, I hope. Otherwise, I'm doing a lot of build up for no reason. And I ended up streaming twice yesterday, and I think I took the day off for streaming before that, but I've been doing it almost every day because I always have tons of paintings to get. And I find these little ones are a little easier to stream because it's easier to fit them. I did stream a really big one. And I know we have one on our list voted on by you marvelous Patreon subscribers that involves a goblin tea party. And I can't decide if that's going to be a big watercolor piece or if I actually want to do that digitally. So I'm thinking on that one. Depends exactly how crazy and detailed I want to get it to be. I'd love to do something with like 100 goblins, but I feel like that's going to take way too much time. It'd be pretty cool to do something with just like a huge scene of goblins. And I was trying to decide if they should have goblin-sized tea things or be all over, like it should be like a human-sized tea service with goblins. But I think it's going to be goblin-sized tea thing since it's their tea party. But it's going to be a totally chaotic mess. So I'm kind of excited to work on that one. I might try to sketch that out some point today. I'm trying to show a variety of creatures on here, so I've shown a lot of dragons. I thought it'd be cool to show some weird monstery creatures the last couple of days, and I'm definitely wanting to show kind of a mermaid piece as well. Okay, so I'm just watching. You'll see me pick up the paper like this and kind of tilt it, and that's me checking to see if there's any shine on the face and how dry it is. And I think if it's not dry yet, I'm just going to blot it a little bit because I don't need it to be too bright. And then I'm going to start doing some of my darker colors, and right now the eye's not standing out very much, but it will when I'm done. So I think for the darker colors, rather than going into like a black or something, which could really take the vibrance out of this, I'm actually going to start with a dark indigo blue, which is sort of, indigo blue is usually something like an ultramarine blue, kind of mixed with a black already, so you can mix one yourself, but if you have a tube of it, it saves a little time. And I'm just going to start kind of building these darker colors, but being careful about, that's why I switched to a small paintbrush here, being careful about what I leave. And I'm also going to use some of my favorite shadow color, which is Moon Glow. You guys hear me talk about that all the time on streams, which is kind of my go-to color for shadows. It's kind of similar to indigo, but it has a little more of a purple color to it. So my goal is to paint in the details, but leave a good amount of those lighter colors that I painted kind of showing through. And that could be a little tricky when you first start with watercolor if you're not used to the idea of layering paint and letting some colors show through, if you're kind of used to going the other way from paints that are not transparent, but it's not too difficult to learn. I've been really happy to see we've kind of been steadily increasing in subscribers and getting more people watching, which is super fun. Anything I could do to break up boredom and maybe inspire somebody to try painting, that makes me happy. So eventually this will start to look really awesome, I promise. Actually, it's getting there. It's getting some depth. Good morning. So happy to see so many people coming back to hang out. That makes me very happy. And apparently I talk in sort of some sort of like Zen way when I'm painting because I zone out a little bit. I wonder if it's kind of like a Bob Ross thing I'm channeling from my childhood where he just would sort of ramble on about the happy trees and things. And I did watch a lot of like Bob Ross and other painting shows as a kid, but I was not a good painter. I did not start painting. Oh, yay, more noise. Oh, it should stop soon. I did not start painting until, gosh, almost my 30s, and I'm 38 now. Probably like 10 years ago. It's probably like 28, 29 when I really started painting seriously. I've been doing a lot of art before that, and I did digital painting, but I definitely didn't do as much with watercolor. I did a bunch of other kinds of paint, and then I would do a lot with colored pencil and things like that too. Aw, you guys are using such cute emoticons today. Yeah, they're just doing, I don't know, leaf blowing or something outside here. So it's starting to look darker, but you can see, let's see if I can bring this up. You can see how much of the lighter color I'm letting show through. And I might eventually come up with just a little bit of black, but I feel like I don't want to lose that sort of iridescent look, because a lot of insects that kind of appear black when you see them under sunlight or you really see them close up, they have a lot of like pretty iridescent colors and rainbow kind of effects, and they're not nearly as boring, I think, as they might appear from a distance or a quick glance. So I was kind of going for that. All right, there we go. Close the window partly. I don't know why they keep starting up again. I thought they were done. Oh well. So yes, this is a very bizarre fly creature, but I want it to be a pretty dainty fly creature, not a hideously frightening fly creature. And last night I was painting the purple grape critter that I'd started yesterday, and I was saying that it's really, really cute, but I think if you give it any kind of fermented grape, anything like wine or anything with fermented grapes, that it would just go nuts. So I kind of liked that idea in my head when I was working on it because it was really cute. But I think these guys are very delicate, refined creatures. They just happen to be giant fly beasts. So what I'll probably do is I actually really like kind of the colors there. So I'll do a little more on the eye. And the very last thing when all this is dry is I will come in with some white and put some highlights on it. Aw. And I'm sorry so many people are bored and having a hard time at home. I mean, I always think I'm just lucky that I don't live in a tiny apartment anymore, that I ended up in a pretty decently sized townhouse. So even though there's two of us here, we're not kind of stepping on each other's toes all the time or anything. And we have enough space that I can be in bedroom or the kitchen or the living room or here in the office, and I'm not crowding myself or the cats or my boyfriend, because that's always good. So that's how fast and easy it is to get some shine going. One of the tricks is that you leave plenty of white or you add white back in, which I'm going to do for these other highlights. And if you have too hard an edge, you can just use a little bit of water on your brush and blend it. It'll come out really cool looking. Add a little more pink up here on the antennas. I like the stripy antennas. I know flies do not have stripy antennas. This is very loosely based on a fly. And flies do not have mouths like this either, but extrovert problems. I've always struggled with that extrovert introvert question, because I was very shy when I was younger, and then I started doing conventions, and I got used to being around people, and then I really started to enjoy it. But I don't feel like I need to be around people, so I guess I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I'm very self sufficient because I grew up in a neighborhood with, counting my brothers, like 8 boys and no girls, and I was homeschooled. And by the time I got, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, like the boys would all kind of go off and do their stuff, or a lot of them would be at school. And my brothers would kind of be off doing whatever the heck they were interested in. And I spent a lot of time drawing and writing and climbing trees and having long conversations with trees. But I learned very quickly that I had to kind of be self sufficient as far as I had to be comfortable with being with myself. I couldn't count on having somebody to reassure me or entertain me. So while I enjoy the company of others, I don't feel like I desperately need to. And to be completely fair, I am not alone. I have a nice family of kitties here, and my boyfriend's been home from work for a bit. He's going back to work this coming weekend, so we'll see how that goes. And of course, I live at work, so I am my own boss, and she is a very difficult boss. So there we go. I usually think it's a really pretty creature. I don't think I've done one quite like this before. So normally I wait to the end to do this, but I kind of want to see how it looks on the face. So I mentioned this in a more recent stream that I kind of couldn't get my normal white ink, which is, I usually get either FW brand or this stuff called Amsterdam, which is white acrylic ink, and you always want to make sure you're getting titanium white as a color. But when I go to buy this at the store, it's $6 to $7 for a bottle that lasts me a really long time. And I usually have a discount coupon. When I looked online, this was like almost $14, which seemed a little bit extreme. It was almost double. And then I found this stuff, which I actually have not seen since my very first anime convention back in 1999, which is actually the Japanese brand. You can see there's even got the kanji, but Amazon had it. And it's the Dealer White 2 ink, which is also waterproof. I think it's also acrylic based. It's very similar. But it comes in a jar with a lid versus an eyedropper, which I like a little bit better. And it was a lot cheaper. It was, I want to say, like under $6 for the same amount of ink, which I was really impressed by. And I honestly would have been using this stuff before, but they didn't have it for a long time. It was a Japanese brand, so it wasn't available in the US. So what's awesome about white acrylic ink is you can get a really good bright white with it. And this is how you bring things like the eyes to life. I tend to do the highlights in the eyes a bit with it, just to really brighten them up. And I will do some of the edges kind of around the eye. And if it's too thick, you can add a little water. I try not to add too much because it can make the paint too thin, and then you don't get the good white. All I'm going to do is kind of grab some of these shapes that I have drawn on with my pen and just add some highlights and pop them out a little bit. Yeah, it was on Amazon. I was really impressed. So I don't know. Sometimes you just get maybe like an importer who's brought in a bunch of Japanese pens or ink, and you can get lucky, and or maybe there's enough artists in the U.S. using this now that it's finally more readily available. This will last me a long time. You see how little I use. I think we've already done like 5 paintings with it, and I barely lowered the ink level. So, but it is such a great way, and this is probably my favorite of the white inks. It's such a great way to just pop things out. If you do decide to use something like gel pen, you can get white gel pens. Keep in mind they're not waterproof, so they will smudge if you add more watercolor over them. And some gel pens don't stay bright white. Sometimes they yellow. Some paint colors have that issue too. So if you don't know that it's bright white, if it doesn't say like titanium white or isn't for doing really bright whites, definitely test it out. Let it sit for maybe a day or two on a scrap piece of paper, and then check to make sure it's still coming out nice and bright, because you do not want to put all the time in and find that you've used, say, China white, which does yellow. And for some reason, a lot of watercolor sets, they come with China white. I don't understand this because I never use it. Um, well, I like Hobby Lobby too, but they don't stock this ink. This ink is not really stocked in any stores that I've seen in the U.S. And Hobby Lobby, I don't know if ours is open right now. They weren't for a while, any of them. And I heard some of them are allowed to be open because they have a lot of school supplies, and a lot of families are trying to do schooling at home. But I definitely do like their coupons, and I do like some of the things that they have if I need a quick thing that I've forgotten to order online. I try to order online, but it's iffy to order inks online. I had to watch for this one and go out and grab it right away because it's so small. What they do when they deliver is they put the package in the mailbox, which would not seem like a big deal. I have this happen with ink for my printer all the time too. And whenever I have it coming in, I have to watch for it because it's already hitting between 75 and 85 degrees at the hottest part of the day, which is usually when the mail comes. And then if that were to sit in the mailbox for 4 or 5 hours, it would be pretty bad for the ink. Well, if it's printer ink, that can just dry a cartridge out and clog it up a lot and things like that. So I try to really be careful if I'm ordering ink to try to be here when it's coming and grab it right away. Here we go. So I will zoom this up even further so we can really look at the face. So you can see how much those little details really bring it to life. Try to get this a little brighter on here. There we go. And I generally will take Hobby Lobby over Michael's as an art supply store in the US just because I've had friends who've worked at both, and Hobby Lobby treats their employees a bit better, and they are not as cramped a store, and they generally have things where they're supposed to be. And for some reason, Michael's, there's a lot of like very small children who run through it and move things around and knock things over, and then they never end up back in the right place. And so you go to get like one type of varnish or something, and it's just not there. So just for that reason, and then like Michael's, they will charge. They'll have like a 40% off sale, but they're 40% off of this watercolor paper I'm painting on is 40% off of, yeah, it is because I live in an oven. No, it's not too bad. It's just it's very dry heat. So during the hottest part of the day, you really don't want ink or paint or anything like that sitting. I mean, I don't think you really want that anywhere because it's not good for it. Really cold weather can kind of destroy ink as well. So you really want to just not have it sitting in a mailbox. But yeah, Michaels will be like, we have 40% off your watercolor paper, except that their base price for the watercolor paper is twice what Hobby Lobby has and 3 times what Amazon has. So I usually will order my watercolor paper on Amazon or from an art supplier like Dick Blick, because I buy a lot of watercolor paper. But if I need some, I can go to Hobby Lobby and just grab one pad, and they always have a discount coupon on their site, and it makes it about the same amount of money. So it's not bad. And I like looking at the weird decor they have there. It's highly entertaining. Sometimes I really like the decor, and sometimes I wonder who's going to hang it up. Our favorite thing was one of they first opened our Hobby Lobby here, which was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it's a really big Hobby Lobby, so they have a lot of stuff. Zebra print was making a comeback, and we actually liked that because we were doing like an 80s themed birthday for a friend of mine. So we went there to look for like random zebra print things that we could use for decorations, but we discovered, amongst other things, they had an intersection of crosses because the store owner is fairly religious, which I don't have an issue with, the company that runs them, because they don't force them on you or anything. But we thought it was so weird that there were zebra print crosses. I guess if you want to be like a really hip person but still display your religious pride, that's when you go for your 80s zebra pattern cross. Probably one of the stranger products I've seen for sale, but thought that was pretty funny. So there we go. That's pretty well highlighted up. And now I have to decide if I want to go darker anywhere to kind of pop things out more. And I'll cover my white ink just because I'm not going to use it more. Oh, no. Like, as someone not originally a Tucsonian, it is so much more comfortable here. Because I come from the East Coast, from upstate New York. And anyone who says summers here are worse has not gone through a summer in upstate New York. It might only reach 95 there, and it might reach 115 at Tucson, which is still not that bad. But the difference in humidity is about 50 to 60% higher. So it's 98% humidity back east. So what happens is not only does everything stick to you no matter what you do, there are almost nowhere in upstate New York that has like central AC because all the buildings are really old, which is they're all historic, which is awesome. But during the summer, it's very uncomfortable because window ACs don't really cut it. And then you have all the bugs. So you have not just mosquitoes, but you have black flies, which are huge vampiric bugs that get in your hair mostly, and they bite you in your hair, and you won't even feel them until after they've bitten you. And then you'll just go, oh, it feels like something stung my head. And you'll put your hand up, and your hand just comes away with blood on it. It is not a good experience. So, having said that, here it does get uncomfortable for the hottest 3.5 months of the year if you try to do something stupid like go out to do an outdoor activity in the middle of the day. But we cool off so much at night that you can just open the windows, and it is pretty nice. And if you do get overheated, as soon as you're in the shade and you have a cold drink, you cool back down. Whereas, yeah, there's just no going back from the humidity. I mean, I spent the first 20 years of my life on the East Coast, and then I lived kind of all over Arizona and California. And I got to say, there's a reason I've been in Tucson for 13 years. For me, it's like the best kind of hybrid of things because if I want to cool off and I really miss some of the cooler climate, I am right at the base of Mount Lemon, so I can just go up the mountain and I can visit snow and things like that. So there's a lot of options, and I think anywhere you're never going to have a perfect climate. If it's really cool in the summers, then you're going to have really harsh winters. So you got to kind of pick what's right for you. And for me, I love Tucson. I really like. I can survive the heat. It is preferable to being bitten by 800 mosquitoes. And mosquitoes still find me here, which I think is funny. They're just 10 mosquitoes instead of 800. And I am not exaggerating on the numbers. I used to look like a swollen mess in summers back east because I would end up with so many bites. So now I'm just using more um, darker blues and blacks to kind of pop out some of the shadows and details. There's just a few areas I'm using a little bit of black where I just really want to have like dimension around the eye and things like that. So I'm just gonna use a little more indigo blue here. And then I want to put, right now the eye is too matchy for me to the rest of it. So I do want to put a little more of that pink into the eye so it really stands out, and a little more blue. Yeah, overall, and I happen to live a little bit on the cooler side of town as well. In a pretty nice area. I mean, it doesn't feel like a big city, which I love because I still have big city perks, but I have clean air and traffic isn't too bad. It's kind of hit or miss. I feel like every year, everywhere, no matter where you live, drivers are getting worse. I don't know. I don't want to do the whole young people these days thing, but I feel like people have forgotten to teach the latest batch of new drivers how to use turn signals at all, which is a little terrifying because I've just noticed more and more people just not using them. Which, if you're weaving in 3 lanes of traffic or you're making a turn, it really helps the people behind you know what the heck is going on. There we go. I think she's really pretty. She's like a very pretty, dainty fly creature. So I always do kind of the most detail in paintings, usually in the faces, because that's where the focal point is going to be. Um, and I'm really pretty happy with the face. I think that's good. So I'll zoom us back out a little bit, and I'm going to be working with a bigger brush, kind of getting those more of those base colors that I started here on the rest of the body, and then we'll do the same kind of darkening over it. But it's not going to be quite as detailed, and I'm not going to do as many highlights because I don't think it needs to pop out as much as the face does. But that's how easy and awesome it is if you have an ink drawing to just layer watercolor in there and use a little white ink, and you get these absolutely beautiful colors and patterns, and very easy to get certain things to stand out. And I mostly learned to paint watercolor this way. I learned a couple different ways, but I learned this way mainly from taking wildlife illustration classes here at the Desert Museum in Tucson, where you're learning from folks who illustrate for field guides and things like that. So they have to get a lot of detail. And a wonderful teacher there named Rachel Ivani, who I believe runs the whole Art Institute there now. She's the one who taught me really how to use either white acrylic or white gouache to pop out details like that. She uses it for doing like the little wet spots on frogs and things for field guides. And then eventually I realized that I liked white ink the best because when you thin down watercolor or acrylic enough to kind of do highlights, it gets too thin, and then you don't get a bright white. So when you do ink that's already kind of at that level of thinness to begin with, it's just not as much work, and it comes out in a really cool bright white pattern. We got 5 people watching now at least. I don't know if the count is ever accurate on here, because sometimes when I look at who's in the chat, it'll list way more than 5. So I don't know if it's 5 people who are more active or how that works. But I'm super happy to have folks tuning in as we create this creature. And then after this, we're going to do, hopefully I have time, a similar technique on a mermaid who's going to have a lot of teal colors on her. Teals and purples. So I'm very excited for that. I mentioned this in the video too. It's actually a mermaid who's already in my latest book, and I just did a quick pretty digital coloring on her for the book. But I've had the original ink drawing sitting here for a while, and I really, really want to add some color to it. Let's see how fast this is. And the trick is I don't want to blend too much of the pink into the green. I'll put it next to it, but I won't blend it in too much because that's where I would get kind of a really ugly muddy color. The neat thing is if you decide something like, oh, it's too pink right there, you just take a little bit of your blue and you tap it on there, and it will automatically kind of blend itself in and make cool patterns. And if it's still too dark, you can just very gently blend it. So when it's wet, all these colors are going to mix together. And then afterwards, I'm going to go and add in the details when it's dry, and that's how you get all these details kind of on top. So for me, the trick is you work light colors to darker colors, and you work larger areas to smaller areas if possible. And you guys, I see I have a bunch of people watching. You're all pretty quiet. You can totally be quiet or you can chat. I am happy to hear from folks. I do keep an eye on the chat while I'm painting, because I'm painting right next to my computer, so that works out pretty well. And I am super happy to answer questions about what kind of paints I use or brushes or any of those things. I cover them a bit in a lot of my videos, so I try not to repeat it too often and drive everyone nuts. And I thought this would just be a fun piece to do because it's a little bit different than some of the dragons and things that I've shown on here. And why not have something a little different for a change? And yeah, I don't know why I think they speak in a British accent. I just think they do. I think they actually can speak English, as well as some sort of very clicky fly language. And they're very proper. But they know humans are scared of them, which is why we don't encounter them often, if at all. Which makes me wonder how they buy their tea or make their tea. I might have to think about who they trade with to get their teas. And this time of year, Tucson weather isn't too bad. It can get warm kind of the middle of the day, but honestly, having gorgeous weather like 9 to 10 months of the year and then a little hot the rest, I don't really mind that. And having grown up driving in snow, I like that I can visit snow within a half hour or so, but I do not have to drive in it if I don't want to. And I have had fun experiences driving in snow in my late teens with black ice and things like that, and I am really glad I don't have to deal with that anymore because it's pretty terrifying. Then again, you can also have something similar here with monsoons, but the difference is if you just wait till after the monsoon, usually within a half hour, most of the water's drained off and it's pretty safe. Whereas the snowstorm, the snow stays and the black ice stays, and it can get pretty dicey for a while. So, and it's really hard on your car. You have to wash your car a lot back east because it ends up with salt and sand on it, and then that can damage the car, which is kind of annoying too. So, and then the area I grew up in when I was a kid, it was totally safe to go out and just roll in the grass, no problems. And now it is the highest, or at least last I checked, it was the highest percentage county for Lyme disease in the U.S. So if you are bitten by a tick, there's a 99% chance it has Lyme disease, and if you don't find it within 12 hours, you have to immediately go on medication. So I don't miss that part either. Yeah, driving in it is horrible. So because I live right by a mountain that actually has skiing and stuff on it, it can be 60, 70 degrees here in the winter, and then there'll be snow up there, and it's only about a half hour drive. So I can go visit it when I want to. I can choose my snow. Only a couple times in the 13 years since I moved here have we gotten snowstorms in town, and they were just little flurries. People here get very excited because they never get those. Um, and they go build snowmen out of like the quarter inch of snow that lasts for about 3 hours and then it melts, which is it's pretty entertaining. But having spent almost 20 years with a lot of snow, and then I lived in Flagstaff for a little bit, and I thought I could handle it because Flagstaff does not get as cold as where I grew up, but it has a much higher wind chill factor, and man, that is a lot harder. You can have dealt with like 10 degrees below, but if you've got wind chill, even if it's warmer, it bites through everything. It is so uncomfortable. And so, yeah, I tried living there for a bit. I lived in San Francisco for a bit. I lived in LA for about almost 3 years. Kind of lived all over a little. I lived in Sedona for a while, not really by choice, but because that was at the time where my family was and they needed some help. And yeah, I definitely, I thought I would be here for 2 years. That was kind of my plan. And then now we're at 13, so I like it. I can do all the things I want to do here, and I can afford to do things like go to the movies or dinner or dancing occasionally and still do something I love for a living, and I would not be able to do that in LA. So that was one of the major decision factors to stay here, was the fact that I still get all the perks, but the cost is so much lower. Oh yeah, sometimes you get huge snowflakes. Huge snowflakes are really cool. You don't get them everywhere and you don't get them every time it snows, but you can get them sometimes and they're really neat. So I think we need a little bit of color for the tea. And I'm just going to use a very teeny amount of pale gold because tea sometimes is sort of a yellowish color. I'm going to add a little shading to the cup here. Probably put just a little bit around the steam coming out to emphasize it. They said we're supposed to get rain, scattered rain showers tonight or tomorrow, and there's like a few clouds and they're fluffy and white, so I don't know what's going on with that. But it doesn't even snow when it's supposed to. That sucks. Yeah, I don't know. The weather's been, I feel like, really weird recently, so I don't think anyone really knows what's going on anymore. um, and I know we're coming up the next couple months. We'll hit monsoon season here, which I actually enjoy. I love rain. I know the thing is, if you're out somewhere in a monsoon strikes, if you're grocery shopping, you honestly you just sit in the car for 10 minutes. You don't even try to drive in it, and it'll pass. And that is much safer than trying to drive in it like an idiot, especially if it's the one of the first monsoons, because when it first starts to rain, if you live in a hot, dry place, if there's a lot of residue on the road, oil from cars and things, you can get hydroplaning really bad. So, but every year we usually lose a couple people. Sometimes they get rescued, often they die because they drive their cars into places that say, do not enter when flooded, and they do it and it's flooded, which I'm not really sure what that's about. Because, yeah, your car can get swept away if you go into a flooded place. I feel like this is kind of logic, and I'm not even from here. Or you can get arrested. Yeah, that's true. Because, yeah, we have a law if you're really dumb motorist and you put people at risk, they can arrest you. I mean, it's essentially reckless driving. So, but yeah, I don't know. Even as someone, when I first kind of moved to Arizona, there are these big signs that say "Do not enter when flooded." I feel like that's pretty obvious. If you're that idiot who still thinks I can drive through that, my favorite one was I used to know somebody who was a cop. I think here in Tucson for a while, but they had an experience with someone who figured that the do not enter when flooded for like underpasses and tunnels only applied to cars and not to motorcycles. And I don't know where they got that idea because I think it's kind of more dangerous on a motorcycle, but they totally tried to drive their motorcycle into about 3 feet of water, and that did not work well for them. They were fine, like they got them out, but they had to, basically go in and pull them out of there because that motorcycle was not going to drive through 3 feet of water. So I don't know. Some people, and then you get up to like Flagstaff where it is snowier, and you get people who think that four-wheel drive means that you can drive really fast in snow, which it does not. So that's always kind of an interesting one too. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm an impatient enough person, but like I can't just be a little safer, pull over, wait for a storm to pass, because here they're really fast. The monsoons kind of go overhead in 5 or 10 minutes, and you can be on your way, and it's no big deal. I like listening to the rain, so the only time it was hard is when my dog was still alive, because as she got older, had a harder and harder time with thunder and lightning, and so it would get she'd go hide in my bathroom every time there was a monsoon, and if I wasn't home, I'd feel really bad because I'd come home and find my poor puppy just like hunkered down in the bathroom. Like I got her one of those thunder shirt things, and that helped. Thunder coat, thunder shirt, whatever they call them, that helped a lot. So if anybody has questions, I am totally here for that too. I'm just kind of building all the happy colors and letting the plenty of my lighter colors show through. That's kind of the trick to getting these cool, shiny, iridescent areas. I'm just putting dark colors, but not covering everything with them. So, And a lot of the trick to doing kind of shading, because I'm doing a lot of my shading in watercolor, is just knowing like these the limbs of this fly are going to be sort of round. I mean, our arms too. We have like a vaguely cylindrical shape to our limbs. So if you know how to shade a cylinder, you can kind of apply those same techniques. I mean, it depends what the material is made out of. If it is a hard material, then you're going to get highlights and shadows that have harder edges. And if it is kind of like a softer material, like blankets or something, you're not going to see the same kind of highlights you'd see, say, on metal. So once you've kind of looked at a bunch of different materials like that and painted them a few times, it makes it a lot easier. I don't really do snow for Christmas or New Year's. I actually don't really do Christmas or much for New Year's. We'll just spend New Year's kind of at home because I don't like how crazy people get. Though sometimes if we have time, we do the British pub that's walking distance for New Year's because they do it New Year's on Greenwich Mean Time or on England time, which means that it happens around 5 o'clock here. So you can go get your free champagne toast at 5. And for us to just walk home and then watch a movie or something and relax and not be dealing with a lot of crazy people drinking. A lot of the bars and things like that, they get really crowded for things like Halloween and New Year's, and that's not really, I don't really think that's fun because if we go out we like to dance and stuff like that, and there's just no way you can get on the dance floor if there's like 200 other people trying to do that, and more excessive drinking, more rowdy people. So we tend to be kind of homebodies for some of those more major holidays. And I don't really celebrate Christmas, so sometimes we do a our own holiday gathering for people who don't really celebrate Christmas or who want to have a reason to escape other Christmas celebrations, and we just kind of do sort of like a veg out party, usually with something like burritos or quiche and maybe a Christmassy movie, but it's usually very vaguely related. It'll be like Die Hard or Gremlins or something like that. Okay, so I'm adding a little more blue to the wings here just because I want to have white highlights be visible when I add those, because right now they would be too light. And then I'm going to do a little more darker color on this part of the fly. And then add some highlights and we'll be good. So that was pretty fast. It's about an hour. Which for something with multiple layers of paint like this is pretty good. The ones that take me anywhere from like 5 to 6 hours to paint are if I'm doing something that has like a really detailed background, like a sea dragon, and it has a whole like coral reef scene with it or something, where I'm just painting fish and starfish and coral and rocks and things like that, because obviously doing like a whole background, if it's a big piece, that takes a lot longer. But these little guys that I do for Patreon subscribers are a lot faster. I'm usually just doing a creature kind of by itself on a smaller piece of watercolor paper. And then because the books I do are usually 6 by 9 inches, this actually would be reduced down in size a bit for print in the books. So that makes the details look even more detailed. So it works out well. I see we got 6 people watching. Yay! I have no idea how accurate that is, but it makes me happy to know there's people out there tuning in. And if you like watching me do weird things with watercolor, you can look at all the links on my Twitch page, to my website, and my Facebook, and things like that, my Patreon. And the bigger pieces that I do, they're more detailed every month. Like we were doing one yesterday that had a whole tea set and dragons in it. Those are all voted on by my Patreon subscribers. And that's good to comment and make requests and suggestions and things like that. So we end up with some pretty wacky ideas, which is great. I have some pretty wacky ideas myself, obviously, because I'm painting a fly monster drinking tea. My original idea was for it to be chai tea, so I could call this the chai fly because I thought that sounded cool. But now I think it's just drinking afternoon tea, so it's just going to be an afternoon tea fly, which I also think sounds good. But they're really big. They're at least kind of close to the size of people. I don't think they make their own mugs, so that'd be like a human size cup. So if you have places where you've got like limbs farther away like this, if you leave them lighter, they'll look more like they're in the background. So I'm not going to do as much on those. So all I have to do now is really add in the white highlights to the rest of it. And it'll be good. So it's all about just building layers of colors, and you can end up with something really beautiful. And that's why I always tell people, be very hesitant about using black and white with watercolor. You really want to try to use dark blues or purples or things like that instead of black, because shadows in real life have a lot of colors in them. You don't want to have black is sort of a dead color, so you don't want to have too much of that, or you'll lose that vibrant look that watercolor has. And then with white, I'll leave a little white showing, but I don't really add white until the end, which is what I'm doing now. And I use white ink and I just do highlights. And it's funny because I actually have a full glass drawing table set up kind of in my studio space, and I don't stream from there because it's nowhere near where my computer and internet connection and stuff is, which is, I could try to set it up with a laptop. I used to do that to record videos, but it's kind of a pain. And half the time I just end up painting in here anyway, or painting in our living room so I can have a TV on, stuff like that. So I use the studio more for really big paintings, bigger projects, which I don't do as much anymore. And then I go to coffee shops to paint sometimes too, though not right now for obvious reasons, as we are at stay-at-home orders. And not only are we at stay-at-home orders, but Arizona has just said that if you are flying into Arizona from any of the hotspot cities, so Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, it doesn't matter if you show symptoms or not. If you fly into Arizona from any of those cities, you have to go into a mandatory 2-week quarantine, which is a huge pain for a lot of travelers. But at the same time, I totally understand that, because the amount of infection in New York City right now, if you're flying in from there, I would want to make sure that we're not bringing tons of folks in to make people sick. We're hanging in there pretty okay right now. Um, we've had some deaths, which, I mean, that everybody kind of knew that was going to happen. But ours are still pretty low, which I try to be as positive as one can be about it. We actually always get a fair number of deaths from the flu and heat stroke and stuff every year, so kind of watching the number. We haven't come anywhere near our flu deaths number from last year yet, so at least for the county, so that's good. I mean, not that deaths are ever good, but at least we're hanging in there, and we're not having our hospitals get overwhelmed. They actually just canceled a lot of our respirator orders because we don't need them as much as other places. We're not using a lot of ours. We're only at 25% respirator use in hospitals in Arizona, which is really awesome to know. Um, so I know a couple people who've gotten sick. They haven't gotten really sick. One of my favorite artists definitely has it. They tested her. They confirmed it. She was coming back from a convention in France and pretty much was feeling sick as soon as she got in. So immediately got checked into the emergency room, and they decided she's fine to recover on her own, but has to be in full quarantine for a couple weeks. So I think the hardest thing for everybody is a lot of the small businesses. I mean, I'm doing my best to keep mine going. I'm running a Kickstarter that we're in our last 19 hours of today, and I am shipping another Kickstarter, and I am doing Temporarily taking commissions, which I don't usually do, for clockwork pet portraits on my online store and some things like that. And then I'm trying to do, like, because our current Kickstarter is a coloring book, we're going to try to really push the digital copies of the coloring book out very, very fast. Since we're wrapping up today, I'm going to try to have them out to everybody early next week. So if your pledge and your survey are all locked down, you'll get your coloring book pretty much right away for the digital copy. So if you're stuck at home, you will have stuff to do. And this fly lady will not be in the coloring book because she's too new. But the coloring book has over 80 bizarre creatures. It has dragons and unicorns and Pegasus lion unicorns because I thought it would be cool to do one creature that was all of those things. So it has a big variety of things to color in it. And I know a lot of my backers on that Kickstarter are families looking for things for their kids to do who are stuck at home. So I'm going to try to get them digital downloads really quick so they can entertain the children who I'm sure are having a pretty hard time with this. It's got to be a weird experience, especially for really young kids, because I'm not sure they understand what's going on. I think even our cats have been a little weird. Like they know something's up, that we're not quite going out as much as we normally would. I mean, we don't go out a lot anyway, so we usually go grocery shopping once or twice a week, and then we might go out to a movie or go out dancing or something like that if our days off work. So we don't get to do those things, which is a little hard. But it's not as bad as people who are kind of used to being out and about every day. And I very much picked a house that was pretty quiet and a great place to work from with lots of space for painting. So at least I get to get a lot of work done. I'm kind of a little jealous of my friends who are like, oh no, we're getting paid to just sit around at home. Our companies are keeping us on, but we can't do anything. So we just have to sit here. I'm like, I still gotta work, but that's because I chose to paint bizarre fly creatures for a living, and I do really enjoy my job. So I don't enjoy all of it. The shipping of stuff is kind of screwy. I don't know if it's screwy worldwide or just the way U.S. mail works for shipping, but they keep upping prices every year and things like that, and it's hard for me to have backers and people placing orders and going, well, why am I having to pay so much in shipping? I'm like, fortunately, that's how much it costs. And it sucks because they have to pledge that money, and then I don't get that money. It goes right back out to all the mailing costs. So I try to figure out solutions of extra stickers and postcards and lightweight things where I really don't add to the cost of the pledge by much, so that way they get a little more value. Or like I'm doing drawings in all of the hardcover books, because drawings don't add to the weight at all for shipping, and then they get a one-of-a-kind book. So I'm working on all that this afternoon. All I'm going to be doing is, after I make his lunches, drawing in hardcover books. So I will have to find some weird old TV series to marathon. I've kind of run out of stuff to watch, which is sad. Not that I watch a ton. Like I usually have the TV on in the background, but I think I'm between seasons of things. So, or if there are seasons, I get like new episodes on Thursdays, and today is Wednesday, so I'll have to find some way to audiobook or entertain myself while I'm working on that. Okay, I think our fly creature is just about done. I'm going to do a few highlights on the wings, and then I'm going to switch over and paint something completely different. And I don't know if I'll completely finish the other one, but it should actually be a faster piece than this because it's not going to have quite as much layering and weird shapes and things that I did. I was having way too much fun drawing this critter yesterday. And I use a lot of creatures like flies and scorpions and rabbits and cats and bizarre birds, all for ideas for my creatures. I think our fly critter looks pretty good. What do you guys think? I don't think it needs anything else. we've got enough highlights, and she's enjoying a nice cup of afternoon tea. Yeah, I've seen like trailers for The Good Doctor. It doesn't really look like the subject matter I would enjoy. I do kind of like the cast, but it doesn't really look like. Um, I don't know. I don't. I feel like a lot of the medical themed shows are either dramas or more like sitcoms, and if it's a drama, it has to be a murder mystery, or I'm not that into it. Which is really sad. Yeah, some people have to be getting murdered for me to be interested. Now I've run out of almost all the British murder shows. I don't think there's any left. I've run out of all the Australian ones. I can go back and rewatch stuff though. So this is the mermaid piece I'm talking about, and as I mentioned earlier, she is in my newest field guide, but I just did a quick digital color, which actually turned out really pretty on her on this. But I still have the original ink drawing, and I would really like to do something with it because I did draw it on watercolor paper. So I'm going to kind of make it match the digital coloring I did. I was kind of hit or miss with House. I've seen here or there some bits and pieces of it. I don't think he's a very pleasant character. So after a while, I kind of want to punish him. I know it's very loosely inspired by Sherlock Holmes, but I like other Holmes inspired shows a little bit better. If you're looking for like that kind of thing, I preferred Regenesis, if you guys have heard of that, which was a Canadian TV series, but maybe don't watch it right now. Because I'm pretty sure one of the episodes of, because I was rewatching it last year, one of the episodes of season maybe two, they actually are dealing with a pandemic that starts in China. Creepy. Um, and it's actually, the science is all really accurate. It's science fiction, but the science is pushed maybe where science would be in like a year or two. So it's pretty accurate to what could happen or would happen, which actually gave me a lot of information kind of when this all started. I had a pretty good idea of what pandemic response would be like from having watched that, which was really weird. But yeah, if you've never seen it, it's a great show. It's a little too realistic, and it might be a very creepy watch right now. It might just scare everybody. So maybe wait till things have died down. So a lot of my mermaids I give kind of more human skin tones to, but this one she's going to have blue skin. And I'm not going to go full head first. I'm not going to go full Avatar or Smurf blue. So I'm going to leave a good amount of white showing, and I'm just going to kind of do the shadows. And I'm starting with her skin on her face and things because those are going to be the lightest. Her hair is going to be quite a bit darker. So I'm just going to do kind of some blending in here with just, and I'm back to cerulean blue, which I seem to use a lot, but I think it works really well for the purposes of this mermaid. Okay. That's pretty good. I'll leave a few highlights. And I'm just looking at everywhere that she has kind of skin showing that's not like the super scaly skin, because I'm going to go actually transition into a little more green for that. And I'm just using a small brush for her ear and her face because I need a lot of control for that level of detail there. And then for the other parts here, now she's a pearl mermaid, so all these things on her are strands of pearls. And if I try to paint around those, it's going to be crazy. Yeah, that could have been a prophecy. I don't know. I thought it was weird that it was in China and there were a lot of parallels, but honestly, that's because scientifically that was where stuff was most likely to happen due to population size and healthcare, which maybe they predicted it right. It's a little scary, but they do actually stop the pandemic in time in Regenesis. So, um, but yeah, that show is so realistic. There was like a couple weeks where I didn't want to eat chicken because I kept thinking I was going to get mad cow disease because I watched too much Regenesis. But it gave me a really good scientific understanding of things like stem cells because all that science is really accurate, which I thought was really cool. A lot of times there's sci-fi, there's a lot more sort of fantasy elements to it. So it was really neat seeing the more scientific elements, and it's I think a Canadian show, from maybe like 10 to 12 years ago. I probably saw it after it had already aired in Canada originally, but I know it was on Amazon last year because I was like, ooh, I could rewatch that. And the characters, you really like them, just be careful. They're not quite as bad as Game of Thrones, but not everybody makes it every season. So if you get too attached, it doesn't go well. Not as bad as Bones though. Bones, I really wanted to like kill them because they literally every time I'd fall in love with a really lovable character, he would die horribly, and I was like, stop killing my characters off, Bones, stop. But yeah, I've seen all of Bones. I've seen all of Silent Witness, which is kind of the slightly more scientifically accurate British Bones, is how I want to describe it. It was on for a lot longer. But it's still on. I think it's on season 22 or 23, which is crazy. I don't really like true crime, though, because, I don't know, I'm too much able to picture things that could really happen to people or have really happened to people, and then I get really depressed. So I kind of love the slightly comical, cheeky, unrealistic level of stuff like Murder, She Wrote and Death in Paradise. But yeah, I'm supposed to get a new season of Death in Paradise this year, or this summer actually. New season of Father Brown. So like I'm just between seasons. So I'm just waiting. So similar to the painting I just finished, I'm just building my lighter base colors. Then I'm going to go in and kind of do some more detail, a little more shading on the scales. I'm going to add color to her eyes, things like that. But because I mentioned the color scheme I had on the digital version of this piece, I want to use a lot of teals and greens kind of for her skin and scales, and then I'm going to use kind of purples, I think, for her hair, which will be really pretty. Trying to think of what other weird TV shows I've watched that I could recommend that maybe people haven't seen, but I mean, I was talking about this in kind of the steampunk chat the other night because we have a steampunk group here that has pretty frequent streams and chats on Facebook. Our steampunk group in Tucson is amazing, and we were discussing. Well, we discussed pretty much everything. But I was trying to think. We were discussing TV shows a bit, and I was recommending a few there too. And I was recommending the Amazon show Just Add Magic is a nice, not too stressful show to watch, and it is entirely intended for probably like 8 to 12-year-old kids. But it is really fun if you like cooking, and it's like a really relaxing and yet still somehow fairly Harry Potter-esque kids show. The theme of the 4 seasons is that these kids get a magical cookbook they are assigned to protect. So they have to cook bizarre recipes, which usually get them into trouble because all recipes have kind of a downside or a backlash, something that happens to you as kind of payment for using the magic. It's not usually a good thing. And they did like 3 seasons of that, and they did the kids started to get too old, so they had it passed on to another generation of kids. They did a spin-off, Just Add Magic, and I think it's called Magic City, and that's actually my favorite season because they're trying to stop the descendants of this evil family from finding, and this is going to sound really weird, from finding an evil sourdough starter that bakes bread that attracts gold, because it attracts the gold that is present in like building infrastructure and those tiny bits of gold. And so if this happens, the city will begin to crumble. Not to mention it'll steal gold from a lot of people. It's got some some serious bad things will happen. So they're trying to stop people from baking evil bread, which I think is pretty funny as a storyline. And they do it really seriously, which somehow makes it more entertaining. So yeah, I think if you don't feel like dealing with heavier TV because or books or whatnot because the world's pretty heavy right now, you can always turn to some of the Amazon and Netflix children's programming, and it's a bit more relaxing. I'm a huge fan of all the Aardman stuff, so Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep. They have a new season of Shaun the Sheep out that I think is the best one yet, and I love it. So if things get too stressful, I just return to those things, or to, say, DuckTales, stuff like that, that's just kind of more nonsensy and a step away from everything going on in the world. Because I don't really want to watch anything super heavy when the world is being super heavy. I think that ends up being too much. I don't know what I was trying to watch. Oh, I was trying to watch Hulu had this show called Hard Sun, and I got most of the way through episode 1, and I was like, nope, this ends turning into a world-ending show, and this is a terrible time to watch that. So we'll just put that away for now, for a later time. Okay, so we're actually getting a little overcast outside because I'm losing some of my light here. Move my, you can see my bar light get moved around there a little bit. So she's coming along. She's already got a lot of good color going on. And I'm going to start to paint in a bit of her hair. So what I want to do for her hair is, and I'm not leaving the pearls, I'm going to paint them with my white ink afterwards, because it'll be a lot easier than trying to paint around all these tiny things. I can get much more even color this way. So I'm going to start with kind of an ultramarine blue, which is a really nice bright blue. I'm actually going to touch just a little bit of the navy blue I was using for shading on my last piece into it. And then I'm going to come in with some awesome violet color and blend that out so we'll get kind of a gradient effect in her hair, which should be really pretty, in theory. And just like with the other painting I was working on, you start out with these bigger, lighter areas, and then when they've dried, we'll come draw some of the individual hairs and the patterns of hairs and things in with a smaller brush to add sort of that texture to it. It'll look really cool. I'm actually going to leave the pearls up there because I think I can pretty easily do that. Get a little more blue for this part. So I love doing kind of a color variation for things like her hair so it's not too boring. I know I've been streaming about coming up on an hour and 20 minutes, so we'll see how much longer we want to go today. I've noticed the last couple of streams it keeps telling me there's a whole bunch of people watching, but you guys are really quiet, so I don't know what that means. Hopefully that I'm interesting enough in the background. There we go. So I will zoom this up a bit so we can kind of see more of the details of her hair and face. The inking I did is really kind of pretty, so I don't need to do too much with the paint. It's more about just creating some shadows, and you're seeing a little bit of the reflection of the wet paint there as it's drying. This is more going to be about building kind of the shadows into her hair, onto her face and stuff as those areas dry. So I'm trying to get a little more under her hair and let that dry so that before I stop I can at least kind of demo how that'll look. And I thought it'd be cool to do a pretty piece like this since I've done a lot of dragons and weird little monsters. And I don't think I've painted any mermaids or fairies on the channel yet, so I'm going to add a little more green to her face too, just to really set it apart from her hair. And like I said, I don't really need this one because I have a digitally colored version of her, but I wanted to kind of a more detailed coloring job for doing some prints, and so I could have a nice original piece for one of our subscribers. And because I really liked how the ink drawing came out, so. And this particular species of mermaids, they're called pearl mermaids, not just because they wear a lot of pearls, but because their entire society is based around pearls and pearl farming and trading pearls with other mermaids and humans and dragons. So That's why she's got so many as decoration. And I try to shy away from, I guess, what would be the most traditional version of mermaids, which is that they have a very clear top half human, bottom half fish or sea creature, because I think if you were really a hybrid of those things, it would be much more mixed. So I tend to include kind of scales and fins on everything, at least a little bit. Just trying to get some nice blends between a couple of different colors for her hair, because I think that'll make it really pretty. And the trick is to just, if you're blending two colors on the paper like this, to get kind of one going, and then while it's still wet, go grab the other one. And because they're still wet, they will nicely, smoothly blend together. And then once they're dry, if you do shadows, those are going to stand out a bit because they will not be blending in as much. Because once it's dry, you're not going to really smudge the paint behind it. I mean, it'll blend into it a little bit if you use a lot of water or really scrub it, but otherwise it works well for building up layers. Darn it, I think I got a little bit of a flicker there again, and I thought I had fixed that issue. We'll see if it... I wonder if just rebooting had temporarily fixed it. I thought I found what was wrong and fixed it, so if you guys do see any kind of staticky flicker on the camera, let me know. Because it was kind of doing that occasionally, and I found what I think is a solution for it, and I haven't noticed it doing it at all today, so... But I thought I just saw it do it. I don't know. She's really pretty. So I have so much detail in my ink because I'm a huge fan of kind of the Art Nouveau style of art, which I think is funny because now it's considered a vintage style of art, but literally what Art Nouveau means is the new art, because at the time it was like a very new, it was the newest style. But her hair is very much in that style where there's a lot of thick lines around the outside and then all these little details kind of inside. So because I already have a lot of those shapes, I don't need to design those in my paint. I just need to kind of highlight them and pull them out a little bit, feature them a little bit. So I'm going to be coming back when this is dry and hitting it with a little bit of a darker color for shadows in her hair. Possibly some highlights, though. I don't think she needs a lot of highlights in her hair because I've painted a lot of this really light. I feel like I've been Twitch streaming for a long time, but it's actually only been a little over 2 weeks. Right around then, since I started a Twitch account, started streaming on Twitch. I think we've gotten a good number of followers and people who enjoy watching, so that's good. When I was looking around Twitch, I noticed there weren't a lot of watercolor paintings being streamed, certainly not fantasy pieces like this, so I thought it would be kind of fun to show that. I do digital art as well, and I've streamed that for just the first couple of my videos so I could get the camera set up really well. But I don't know for sure if I want to do a lot more digital art on Twitch just because so many people are already doing it. I might at some point. There's a few digital pieces I really want to do, so I might show some of those. But a lot of the stuff you see me working on here is just kind of my day-to-day art I've got to get painted. So I figure I might as well stream it. There we go. And she's actually going to be holding a really giant pearl. So pearls are very much a very light colored thing. They have a tiny bit of color to them just in kind of their iridescence. And if I just leave it white, it's going to look flat. So I'm just going to add just a little bit of blue and pink to this and blend it out. And I will probably add some white and kind of tone this down a little, pop out some highlights and things as it dries, but it's better to go a little darker there so I can really make the highlights show up. So make sure that's all smooth. All right, so I think I want to use this same, I was going to make her eyes purple, but I think I'm going to use this same sort of bright pink so they really stand out. I think that's pretty cool. And then I'm going to use some of that on her lips here, but I'm going to come in, I really want to do kind of purple, but I want it more of a sort of maroon color. Let's see if this works. That's pretty good. And I want to bring some of that into her hair as well. So now that this has started to dry, I can go in here and start to add some details and texture to it. And I just use a smaller brush for this. And you can see already how it looks like strands of hair. You just follow the shape of the hair. In this case, I've already done it in pen with your brush. So instead of just going like this straight across, I am following each shape, and that's what makes it look like strands of hair. I'm going to bring in just a little darker blue into here as well. I really want to kind of suggest those shapes, but I want to leave plenty of my lighter color showing through too. I'm just trying to evaluate where I might need shadows and things. So if I tried to paint around the pearls in her hair, it would have been really difficult to get these smoother gradients of color that I wanted. So I'm just going to add them back in with white. I also could have used a masking fluid to save them, but I hate kind of peeling it off the paper later. It usually doesn't damage the paper if you have good masking fluid, but I just felt like it made more sense to use white ink for most of the stuff that I do, especially because I'm going to make her scales kind of glistening. And for that, the white will be very useful. Okay, so get a little more of our teal blue here. I might use some peacock green because it's a very blue green. It should work really well for this. There we go. That's more the color I wanted. And I'm just basically building the shadows over the areas that are dry to create patterns. I'm leaving certain colors peeking through. So she does transition from more of a blue teal color on her upper body and arms to I'm putting kind of a greener color on her tails and her tail and fins just to have some variation. But as I said, I don't like doing that 50% cut off in the middle where it looks like someone's wearing a mermaid tail, or where's the color is just weird, so it's like skin color and then it's bright green. That totally works for one style of mermaid, but I try to make mine look a little bit more believable as creatures. So I tend to use real fish for inspiration and do a lot of looking at fish scales and patterns and things. I'm just still building up some of the colors on things here. I'm just going to use the more of the ultramarine to kind of pop out some of the textures in her hair. I really want to have a little bit of texture up here. So you'll see that, again, I'm following the way the hair would grow with my brush strokes, the shapes of the hair versus just painting in kind of a round shape or a straight line. I'm following it because her hair is kind of doing this. And that will give it a lot more of the correct sort of shape and shading and tone for it. She's starting to come together pretty good. And then adding a little more shading with ultramarine to her skin too, to just kind of get some of those shadows to pop out. Probably gonna knock off pretty soon. Go get started making stir fry for lunch. I feel like this blue looks a little more intense on the camera and when it's wet, and then as it starts to dry, it blends in a little bit better, but when it's wet, it looks really kind of neon-y. And I think that's just because it's wet. It's just the light kind of reflecting that way. But I do kind of want to build some darker colors into her hair here. And if it's too dark, I can kind of really blend it out a little bit. And one of the things you can do if it's wet and it's something too dark is I can take this lighter blue and touch it in here as well, or just water, and it will push the paint away a little bit and lighten that up. There we go. And yeah, it does look kind of neon-y on the kind of looks neon on the camera more than it does in real life, and I think that's very much the just the fact that it's wet and the light kind of reflecting off of it, because as this dries it's gonna become a little bit duller, like the blue up here in her hair. Just adding a little more purple into it. I know she's got eyelashes there that are kind of getting blended in, but I'm not too worried because, again, I'm going to use white paint and probably going to put a little bit of an outline around her profile here. So I probably want to show that before we stop, because that's what will really make this look cool. Just working some of the different blues into her. Wait for that dry. Does anybody have questions, comments, requests, feedback while I am kind of waiting on this to dry a little bit? She's turned out really pretty though, which I'm pretty happy with. I just have a lot more to do on her hair. And I tend to think of mermaids as having sort of iridescent, multicolored scales and hair, so I think it's kind of boring to just give them one color. Occasionally I've done just like, I think one of the other mermaids in this book has kind of just red hair, but it does have a couple different shades of red and orange in it. But I tend to give mine these sort of multicolored hairstyles. I think it's really cool. Partly because I wish my hair was like that. It'd be really, really neat if you could have like 6 colors naturally in your hair or something. I think the kitten's starting to get mad at me for being shut away painting. I can't have her in here because she tries to headbutt the camera, and then the camera jiggles all the time and doesn't work too well if there's a painting underneath it that she's trying to step on and stuff like that. So I'm just working on making sure certain things kind of blend here where I want them to, and other things kind of stand out. That just takes time and lots of layers of paint. And now I'm just waiting on stuff to dry. Just getting there. So sometimes if you have to wait a lot for something to dry, you can work on another part of the same picture, or you can have another picture nearby, be working on that. I'm happy to see 5 or 6 people tuning in most times when I'm painting. That means somebody is being vaguely entertained by me, at least in the background. And I'm hearing from more and more people they're really bored, so at least maybe I can provide some breakup of your day by streaming some painting. Okay, so this part over here is kind of bugging me because it's not dry yet. Oh, it's pretty close. So you can always kind of blot stuff and lighten it up that way too. Okay, so I've got kind of her face there and her hair there, and I'm just going to go for a teeny tiny brush. It's one of the smallest ones that I have. I'm going to use my white ink again. And this requires a pretty steady hand. I'm just going to pop the highlight in her eye out a little more. Pop out some highlights in a few other places here. I want to make sure that things generally look natural, and then this is how I will do. This will be a very tedious task. All of the pearls in her hair. And sometimes I do also do highlights on the hair, but I don't think it needs white highlights, especially if the pearls are white. What I am going to do is actually highlight. It's going to look a little weird at first, but it'll make sense. I'm going to highlight the edge of her face here. And if that's too sharp, I can very easily kind of blend it a little. Just to create some lighter area there. Because I want her her face to stand out from her hair a bit, and she has eyelashes here that are getting kind of lost, so this is like a form of edge lighting that's really handy for kind of popping out some of those shapes. And right now it looks really bold. It looks kind of weird having a white line there. But what I'm going to do is just get water on my brush, and I'm going to blend it into her hair. And the nice thing is if you kind of mess up and go over your ink a little bit, it's pretty easy to grab a black pen once it's dry and fix things as needed. So this is a great way if you find some area is too dark. Okay, I'm going to need to fix her lashes when this is all done. It's a great way to pop out certain things. I'll have to do a lot of time doing pearls. That's going to be fun because she has a lot of pearls. You can see it's starting to come together a little bit here. The nice thing is with white ink, and because she's originally on black pen, I can tweak little things with this, and it will not be an issue because I can just always go back in with a little bit of pen or with my white ink like this and really pull details out. It looks pretty good. I think I will grab one of my, I just use Sharpie pens. That's what this was inked with originally. And put kind of her lashes back in there a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good. So that's kind of how you do things like faces and all those details. And if you want them to have kind of water or scale patterns or glistening on their face, you can use the white ink for that as well. I'm going to put a little bit of that on her face. And it's really the discretion of the artist, how much you want to do with things like highlights. I tend to make my mermaids pretty sparkly. It's not like a glitter thing. I just think if you're underwater, you're going to glisten a little. So, and I did end up putting a little white in her hair up there to kind of pull some of the details more because I feel like she could use some highlights after all. So, get more pearls here. Why did I draw so many pearls on here? I thought this was really cool when I inked this picture a while back, and now, of course, I have to deal with it in painting it, but really pretty happy with her face and kind of how her hair is starting to come together around it. I think I need to kind of get onto my other projects for today too, so I'll probably have to come back to her tomorrow. And like I said with the white ink, what I love is that you can add some for a highlight and then use a brush and blend it in. And if you feel it is too white, like that bit I just did, you can also grab a little bit of watercolor and mix it in with your ink just to create exactly the effect that you want. That's pretty good. So all I have to do is that sort of thing on the entire rest of this mermaid. I haven't even painted the rest of her tail, so that's gonna be a bit of a project. So I am probably gonna knock off now and come back to this in another stream tomorrow, and we'll try to work more on all of her details because she has a lot of them. But it's a good start. And I got about half of her painted, and then the entirety of our weird fly creature got painted, so I'm happy about that. All right. I think that's where I'm going to end it for today. And I hope you guys are all hanging in there, being as kind as you can to everyone else, even people who might not be being kind to you, and making the best of your time at home by learning new things and eating tasty foods and getting some form of exercise and mostly just taking care of yourself and your loved ones. And I will be back with more painting tomorrow. Thank you guys for tuning in.